second.
This is the BAM Podcast with Malcolm Springer.
The BAM Podcast is brought to you by Hook Hats. Hook Hats are individually created and never duplicated. Hook Hats are custom, high-quality hats made in Franklin, Tennessee. Go to hookhats.com. For a discount on Hook Hats, type in the code 10, and that way he'll give you 10% discount from hearing that on our podcast. Erik Baker.
Good
Good to have you here, man. Good to have you here. Turn it down on the control room volume, baby. Good to have you here, man. We're here to talk about some crazy shit today.
Don't we always talk about some crazy shit?
We always do. That's why I want you on here. And everybody that I've told Erik Baker's coming on the podcast are like, oh my God, this is good. You should have heard Holly. She's like, oh my God, this is going to be fucking awesome. And I was just like, I was like, well, you know, just to let you folks know that he is, I tell everybody, which, you know how I am. I brag about you too much, but I do. He's a big heartbeat of the radio at Rock. And he's also a close, dear friend of mine. And we have meetings at what's that place called?
Which place?
The game room thing we go to.
The game room thing we go to?
Yeah, remember we go out there and you start playing those quarter things, shoving those.
What are you talking about? Wait, like Dave and Buster's?
Dave and Buster's.
Oh, yeah. I'm like, oh, Jesus, I know. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Who has meetings at Dave and Buster's besides me and you?
Yeah, well, I mean, people that are hard of hearing, maybe, because it's really loud. You have to be able to.
It is really loud. It's really loud there, but it's a place that keeps us out of trouble.
You know, I will say this: it was different though before the pandemic. It's actually louder now. Post.
Is it really?
Oh yeah. It's much it's much louder. They have like kind of redone the place, and they have put a whole bunch more games in there than they used to have packed in there. I went there with I went there with my mom was in town. I went there with her and my daughter, and it was just so fucking loud in there. I mean, I was literally having to yell to Anna, and it was just like, this is ridiculous. So yeah, we wouldn't go there now, but they actually have a place over here called the Game Terminal, which is pinball. And so you pay for the pinball, but they have like, I don't know, 150 of the classic arcade games. So everything from like Pole Position to Pac-Man and whatever, and they're all free.
Where's this at?
It's in one of those like, darn it, what do I want? It's a bunch of warehouses and shit around it, right? You would not think that it's back in there. You can look it up and it'll give you directions to go back in.
I've heard of that though.
It's like in one of those, I'm trying to think what the district is called, where it's like, it's a bunch of warehouses, right? And
it's completely free.
You see a bunch of yeah, I mean, you pay for the pinball. So, you know, you go in, you put $20 in the machine and you get you get whatever the tokens or the quarters or whatever they give you. But I mean, they've got like, I don't know, 200 pinball games or something. So they've got everything from like the oldest thing that you can imagine that you probably played when you were a kid, all the way up to the newest, craziest fucking Guns N' Roses and Aerosmith. They've got a Motley Crue stadium pinball machine. That's
no way.
It's insane.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I gotta go. I gotta take my kids.
And it's like, and they've got a whole outside thing with cornhole and fucking shuffleboard and like fucking weird. I mean, they made this whole like outside garden. So yeah, it's pretty much an adult. It's a place where you could actually see people going there. You can tell they're there like either meeting for work stuff or there's some sort of.
I gotta look this up because me and Tiffany saw that it was going in, but
it really is incredible. And they have also have like a shop on the side where they sell pinball games and they service pinball machines and all that. Because I was thinking, I really wanted a pinball machine, but I live in a townhome, and so like the townhome I have, it's like I have like all this shit for my daughter, like because she lives in the. So people find this funny. I sleep, or my room is downstairs I have what would be considered the secondary bedroom, and then my 6-year-old has the whole loft and the whole master bedroom, and so I've already got that full of all the games and shit that she possibly needs. I was like, I can't fit a
but I would do that too. I wouldn't want my kids on the bottom and me on the top up there.
Honestly, yeah, it was actually it was like both. It was like, okay, well, she can have more room and she have stuff to play with up there. And then for me, it was more about safety because it's like, I don't.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You wouldn't want to, I mean, she's too little to sneak out and, go
Yeah. I
party
mean,
or
hey, if she
anything
was old
yet.
enough to sneak out, it wouldn't matter what floor she was on. She'd be.
Well, you got a point there. Believe me,
I was going to say that never stopped me from sneaking out.
I've got one that's 19, and it was hell. A teenage. There is no. You can't communicate with a teenage girl. I mean, they're just hard to communicate with, and they are on their own plane of existence, and you are just kind of like, just do your best until
when I was a teen, I'm pretty
teenagers.
sure I was on my own. And I mean, a female teen is even different than that. But I mean, even when I was a teen, I was in a total plane of existence of my own too.
Really,
so.
I tell you what, I was too scared of my dad to make him mess up too much.
Yeah.
I was terrified of what he would do to me if I messed up too much. I still messed up,
Right.
but now, I knew the line to draw. I knew where the line was drawn and where I didn't cross that line. And the teenage girls, I found out with raising a girl that it was, man. I mean, it's like they know they got you wrapped, so you're already screwed from the get-go. So they know they're going to talk you out of anything, and they know you're going to buy them everything you can.
Yeah.
It's like, so you're just screwed.
Yeah. There's a fine line between just buying them whatever that they want because like you just feel like you want to do that, and then spoiling them and whatever.
Oh,
so
man.
yeah, I've just decided I'm not going to get too much in my head about it because that seems to be a popular way to live life now is to just over fucking think everything that you do, and it's like, well, I don't want to do this because I don't want to do this. It's a lot of living life around what you don't want to do. And as much as I'm not a fan of the law of attraction per se, the idea of living life by what you don't want to do, I think sort of negates the fact of living life and enjoying life. And I know quite a few people that don't understand why they don't really enjoy life. And then we start talking about things. They're like, well, I don't really want to do this because if I do that, then this, and it's like a whole bunch of fear.
So you don't feel that you need to do things you hate to love your life?
No, not at all. Definitely.
See, I do. I think I have to, like, that's what I didn't hate working out when I was working out, hopefully I can get back in the gym soon. I'm praying I can. But it seemed like the more harder I worked out and the more I hated it, the more I loved my life. And I'm serious.
Yeah.
Like I felt like I accomplished something. Like I got up in the morning, I did something I didn't want to do, and that made me start my day out. So that made everything else that I didn't want to do seem like it was so easy.
I mean, so let's just dive into the woo because that's
Okay,
really
that.
what we're here to talk about. So everything that we know now, and when I say everything, I mean basically everything that we know. It's backwards. It's all backwards. And when I say backwards, what do I mean by backwards? I mean, we have been living the last 10,000 years of our existence in an inverted matrix. It is the inverse of what is true. If we were to look at this from outside of space and time, we would realize that for roughly the last 10,000 years, this is a system. It is an operating system on the planet. It is everything lives within, or has, at least until the end of 2019, has lived inside an inverted matrix. Saying that, we are still experiencing the inverse because even though there is no longer a signal, if you want to call it that, being transmitted to back up this operating system, we can look at it like this. When Microsoft gets a new updating system, new operating system, they send out updates, right? And you get updates, whether it's every fucking day or every, couple of weeks. There are continuous updates. Well, there are no longer any updates to the inverted matrix, but we have, and let's just say that we only lived one lifetime, which isn't true. But if we did just live one lifetime, you could look at this entire life as we have programming, right? Because we are like human computers per se, and we're walking around and we are constantly we are sending our programming out into what we consider to be the world, right? So I'm constantly saying, I do this. So Malcolm says, well, I think this way because I did this thing, right? And this thing is you didn't like working out, but you worked out. And so you felt good after you worked out, right?
Because I made myself do it.
And you made yourself do it. Now, you did have that experience. So I can't tell you that what you said isn't true because for you, that is the experience you had. And I have had the exact same experience that you've had, right? Literally the same exact experience of course, I didn't work out first thing in the morning. I did it in the afternoon, but it didn't really matter. For me, sometimes it actually was getting up earlier in the day, right? So actually getting up earlier and being one that would actually get up and start being in a habit of getting up earlier when I didn't want to get up could set me in motion to do things that if I fell back into the pattern per se of sleeping until 10:30 or whatever that might be, where versus getting up at 6, I wouldn't necessarily feel as good. But I'm looking at this more from a bird's eye view now, a more zoomed out perspective, if you will, of looking at what the true nature of reality is. And there are many, many, many people waking up to this more and more who have, I want to say everyone knows, but they're not consciously aware of it. Because when we're born, into a physical body again in this lifetime, there's essentially for most of us there is a set of rules we have to abide by, and part of that is that we no longer remember. We don't remember what we did in the lifetime before, which is another rabbit hole because
well, I think though that we've stayed up many nights talking about stuff like this. That's why I wanted to have you on here because that I believe the same way as reincarnation, and I do believe there is an ultimate heaven at the end of your journey. But I think that journey is a long journey of lifetimes. But that's just me,
it's an infinite game. There is no end. But you don't need there to be
you know
an
what
end.
I'm saying.
I
though.
do, and we're saying the same thing. This is an actually perfect example of two people saying words that are different, but the meaning behind it, and I can look at you and I know that we actually mean the same exact thing. And so there's a lot of divisiveness out there right now around, so someone might hear what I'm saying and then there's a resonance to that and they go, oh my gosh, and it wakes something up in them and they're like, oh shit. And it's happened in a million different ways, but then they have this resonance with it and they're like, oh my gosh, that totally, I vibe with that. But then someone might also hear what I'm saying and then they don't align exactly with the words I'm saying. Although at the end of the day, we all have, there are some underlying truths that don't have to do with perception, right? That are like,
So do you think that is because they are? You talk about software that we're all walking computers. Do you think because they're programmed a certain way through this matrix?
Yeah, I mean, there is. If you want to go into, there is varying degrees and levels of this that we have to look at really to understand. And I've kind of jumped into this, and I've gone like way, way, way into the deep end. Most people would understand the inverted matrix if you wake up to the what I would call the conspiracies of the world, right? So and again, some people are not awake to those conspiracies, and honestly they may never be because that may not be their path. Everyone does have a chosen path that they have designed most of their life, at least the bigger parts of their life, and in the overall arch of where they're going and what they're doing in this particular lifetime. That's pretty much all set. There is a course already set before we come into this human body, right? So, but let me say this. So the idea is that there is we would see the inverted matrix as the control structure that is what has helped put things like the cabal in place. So people would call them the black hats or the cabal, those who may have been presidents, or those, you'll hear people talk about the David Icke talking about the reptilians, or those who control the planet, so on and so forth. There's a lot of misinformation out there. The way I tend to look at it actually is less about misinformation and more about it's actually a different perspective, right? There's just people that see certain things and they dig into certain things, most of which actually have a truth to them. We have lived in what some will refer to as a prison planet, where we are trapped in a reincarnation cycle. The truth is that you can look at it that way. there is a truth to the fact that we have been trapped in this reincarnation cycle over and over again. However, when you zoom far enough out, we're not actually trapped in anything. We are not a victim of anything. We have chosen on a higher level to all come in and play this game. So when my highest high beyond all illusion, my divine will, which is source, decided to take on this human form, there's a lot of planning and whatever that goes into that outside of space and time, right? So again, we are programmed here to believe in space and time. And in this inverted matrix that we're in, part of this inverted is that we have to forget. And not only do we have to forget, it's almost like we forgot that we forgot. We have to go really, really, really deep into the game. Now, we're all here to learn and grow. And part of what we task ourselves with doing when we come here is to wake up from that sleep or that forgetting and start to remember a little more and a little more. But it's been really, really tough until the end of 2019 when this matrix was no longer powered. It was nearly impossible because we're born with an ego, and the ego operating system is what continuously powered the matrix, the false matrix.
So you keep saying 2019. Can you elaborate on that? Because I'm most interested to see was there a certain date, or did the year change?
Yeah, I mean, I don't get things in.
I felt there was a change in 2019.
There is. So at the very end, the date, and I just know that it was right around Christmas from my own personal experience and the inner knowledge that I have from being able to tap in myself in what some would call a meditative state, or being able to connect to your higher self, which is what I call there are many levels of higher self, but actually connecting to that source aspect of yourself where you can pull information out of what many would call the akashic records, or your human akash.
Yeah, I believe in akashic record for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it is just a record of it. Our subconscious, to make that very much more simple, I think, for people to understand, instead of some kind of broad, like esoteric idea, is that we all have a subconscious, right? And I think most people are going to agree that they've got a subconscious mind, which it's just that's a whole nother part. But the subconscious mind is literally a recorder. And it records like a video camera, except it records everything all around you at all times. Very much from a perspective, but it also picks up on things in your peripheral that you wouldn't necessarily see. You might not know what Jack and Jill are over here talking about at the table in the corner when you're at the restaurant, but your subconscious mind is actually recording all of that at once. So there's no perspective on the background stuff, but there is a perspective on whatever it is you're viewing. So whoever you're eating dinner with, your date, your kids, your wife, whatever that might be. So all of those recorded records, they go somewhere. That's what you would call the human akash. Now, we all have our own personal akashic records, but there is a collective record, and that is all of our subconsciouses recording what is going on. And there's tons of different what I would call practitioners or facilitators out there that have tapped in and are basically experts in the akash.
So you feel that the akashic record is within us?
It is. It's both within you.
I thought that it would be like the air that we breathe.
It is. It is. This is where it gets really trippy. All right. So my first real dive into the akashic records was someone who's a very close friend of mine. His name is Bill Foss, and Bill wrote the book Journey to the Akashic Records. He's since written several follow-ups, and I found Bill. I was watching George Norrie do a show on Gaia called Beyond Belief, and I was maybe 2015 or so, 2016. I was just really hungry, looking for information, and I ran across him and I contacted him, and I learned a whole lot about the records. That was more, it wasn't my inner knowing of what they were, but it was helping to stimulate me getting to a point where I could. And so he does a teaching where he'll actually take a guided meditation, or he did one here actually in person in Nashville. over at Cosmic Connection, and there was a group of people, and of course, you know, he takes you out to the records, right? And there are different places where the records are located, and this is
like physically,
like, if you want to call it physically, etherically, right?
Etherically. Okay.
So he's taking you up and away out of your, you know, you're in a meditation. Now, of course, you're seeing it the way that you see it, but he is guiding you to the place where they are located.
So this guy helps you travel.
Yeah, so you can call this astral travel if you want to call that
astral traveling.
Yeah, you can. It is.
That's so interesting.
Everybody experiences it a little bit different. Some are like exactly what you might hear of, you know, the term astral travel, and others are literally using their imagination. But then, as you enter a deeper and deeper state using the imagination, eventually you're in more of a awakened dream state, right? And you are then traveling to your records. So when I say this, it is both a place within you, and it is also a place if you want to look at it outside of you. And when I say this, everything outside of you is an illusion. There is actually nothing outside of you from the highest perspective.
Right.
There really is nothing outside of you. Everything that you experience is actually coming from inside of you. It is an illusion that there is anything outside of you. But to not go, that's like, honestly, that's something hard to have a conversation with someone about, because each person needs to understand that on their own without per se talking about it.
Because I didn't understand traveling, and I was taught to meditate actually from the man who, you know, helped raise me, Gary Bells, and he gave me a book, and I learned how to meditate from that. But a lot of his stuff comes from India, the Sai Baba, and you know the Dalai Lama and all that. So it's so interesting because about a year into it, we did what I would say is astral travel, and it wasn't it wasn't imagining anything. It was like I went there. I remember I entered from the water, and you know, and it came out, and I was walking on the beach. One time I was walking with Christ, and another time I was walking with my father. You know, and that's when I stopped doing it.
Yeah, see, this is interesting. What just comes, so I get things that come through because you and I both lived a life with Christ, right? And it's interesting you say that, and because you and I actually have never talked about this before. You've come to me and said, man, you might, hey man, you might think I'm crazy, but you know, we fought a war. You know, we were fighting in the war together before, and I was like, no, I don't think that's crazy.
We were in the war together. I don't know if it was World War I. And people out there can think that we're crazy all they want, but when you know something, I had a vivid dream though that we were in a foxhole and that we were getting shot at, and that there was explosions all around, and you had said something to me, and I remember there were other people there that I didn't know or I hadn't ran into in life yet. You know, does that make any sense?
Yeah, of course.
And if people think that's crazy, I don't care because it's real. It's so real. And I told Tiffany about it. She goes, That's crazy.
I look at it. You know what it is? Here's the thing. It's all fascinating. Now, if you are, I don't even want to say awake, because all right, most people that are going to be listening to this at this point, if they've made it this far and they haven't turned this off, like, dude, these guys are crazy or whatever, then they're probably not going to think it's crazy. But the fact is that it's fascinating. And in my awakening journey, if you want to call it that, I have run into all kinds of information that at one time, it didn't fit on me. It was a piece of clothing that didn't fit, right? And then another time later on, I somehow came into that information again because it's in my field. We all have a field. We carry information in the field, and somehow or another, it was information that I was supposed to have, and I was able to integrate that at some point, right? So to me, whatever I hear, I try not to judge it. And I spent a lot of time just judging fucking everything. And now I'm in more of a place of non-judgment and realizing that almost everything that you hear is someone's experience. And you cannot take away the reality of that experience from them, no matter what. So if it sounds fucking crazy to you, well, then so be it. I mean, that's fine, because the reality is that you only need to know that for yourself. Now, it was good because you came to me and we co-created that moment together, however long ago that. Right. And again, also for people to understand, if you've ever heard that there is no such thing as time, or time isn't linear per se. That is also true. I do feel that lifetime in particular was actually in what we would call our past, right? Because it was literally
what we would call our past.
Yeah, it was literally in what we would call the linear human. I mean, because there is a human, we don't take that away. There was literally the 1940s and 50s and 60s and 70s. Right. So what we would experience as that, I do believe that was an actual past lifetime, if you would. Sure. But we also can tap into what are actually future lifetimes. And when I say future, it is not the future of what we would be experiencing right now, per se. It would be, usually these futures are, if it is a future on Earth, it is actually from would be what you'd call another timeline, right? And there are many people that actually have recall now of these other lifetimes that they've lived. And so what they perceive that they actually know what the future is. And in fact, it isn't that they know what the future is. It's just whatever that timeline was.
Right.
So that timeline is not necessarily at all what's happening in this timeline. And this is where things can start to get, they can start to get really out there. And some of it, quite honestly, we're not supposed to wrap our head around with the human mind. Not with the human mind, the limited access to the human mind that we currently have, which is changing. So I'm going to jump back over, because you and I will.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. But we will chain link way out.
Yeah.
But I'm going to come back to the Matrix, right? Okay. And the Matrix itself, every we'll call it, I don't know if you want to call it planetary structure or civilization or whatever that might be, any collective consciousness has an actual, like a matrix, right? And this didn't, I believe the movie The Matrix actually was taking from this, because The Matrix is more like a documentary than it is a fantasy film. While it is Hollywoodized in some parts, there's so many codes streaming through that movie that have helped wake up humanity that that's fascinating on its own. But the inverted matrix that we have been in is something that we all, when we were sold this as a collective, and we all had to agree, and this is from a higher, more oversoul perspective, it was the bill of goods it was sold to us as is, if you guys really want to supercharge your evolution, if you really, really want to grow, and you want to grow in the grandest way possible, then you jump into this and you have the most polarizing experiences that you can have. And that is the best word to describe it. It is polarized. The inversion is polarized. The 0 point, or the point outside of the matrix, is neutrality. So you hear someone say they were 0 point, a 0 point is neutral. There is no good, there is no bad, there just is. And there's a lot of fear around that as well, around, well, if I'm neutral, then how can I even really have an experience? And the fact is that you can look at some words, and some words will describe these feelings that we have, right? And in a state of neutrality, you do still have a feeling, but it's much more stable. It isn't so up and down, so wild. And that is where the whole of humanity is heading towards a neutral standpoint, but we're all in different places. And so the beginning of, we can call it the march towards, not even the march, the expansion towards being neutral, started with that matrix, that inverted matrix, coming offline and reverting back to what we would call the organic 3D and 5D. 4D is, this is also left up for debate. Some people can say there's 3D, 4D, 5D. I understand 4D to be what is the organic matrix, which is what existed before. So from 15,000 years ago to 10,000 years ago, we did have 5,000 years of what you would call Lemuria, Atlantis. Those were times of, some people say it was fifth dimensional, but it doesn't really matter what dimension it was. It was higher consciousness. And in that higher consciousness, we didn't have the polarity that we had now. There was no inverted matrix.
So when you say, do you, just to let people be clear about some things, see, me, I look at us as all we're ones and zeros. But now, because science has proven that we're all ones and zeros, we are a negative and positives, every single bit of us. Mm-hmm. And it's so funny because there was a literally us being held together is not really supposed to be that way. And in the Bible, it says that God is the one who holds us together, who holds it all together. Um, I don't really know what that means, but anyway, the whole point is though, like if you think, okay, so here's how I try to explain to people, and I want to know what your opinion is. Is Japan really there right now? Now you've been in Japan, hadn't you?
Mm-hmm.
See, I haven't, so that's not part of my matrix. That's not part of my reality. But here's the really wild thing: I have relatives that's from Japan.
I was just thinking about it. You know what?
Is Japan really there right now?
Asia, not. I've not been to Japan specifically. However, okay, it just depends on what consciousness you're looking at it from. If we are sitting here right now and saying, here we are, we're third dimensional beings, and we want to talk about does Japan exist in the third dimensional world? I will say yes, Japan exists in the third dimensional world. Now, you might ask, is the Earth flat or is it round? I will tell you both. I will tell you that there is a cluster consciousness that believes both.
There is a cluster consciousness.
Therefore, it is that if you ask me if hell is real, I will tell you that from outside of the inversion, okay, hell isn't real from outside the inversion. But also outside the inversion, the Earth isn't either. It is not round, nor is it flat, because it is just a projection.
Right.
So if I'm looking though at hell isn't actually anything that we project as physical, but there are enough people that believe in it. Okay. Now this is in the inverse, because religion, and this is a big thing when I talk about Christ, I'm very passionate about this actually because of the relationship that I've had with Christ, that I have with Christ outside in this lifetime and outside of this lifetime. I mean, since I was a child, I just knew, and my dad's a very, very religious man. And my mom, not so much, although I, went to church every Sunday when I was a kid. But I just knew, I mean, and this plagued me, by the way, for years, especially trying to get sober when I was basically told that, I needed to find God, which I did in my own way. But it was tough for me because I saw all these people that were religious and they were just giving their quote unquote life over to Christ. And I knew in me from the depth of my being that the most perverse thing that, in my mind, at least up to that point, the most perverse thing ever was that Christ was to be worshiped, because that isn't Christ. Right. That is literally the opposite. And I implore people to sit with that. And sometimes it's hard because it is the programming. It is the inverse programming. And it's quite honestly brilliant. I mean, the programming that, if you want to call them the dark ones, which that did exist. They actually still exist right now, but it's how much power you let them have over you. This all becomes a game of how much personal, how disempowered are you? We can talk about, does God hold it all together? Well, are you God or are you not? That's another question. And I can't answer that for anyone. You can only answer that for yourself. I also can't tell you what God is, because I feel that's a huge disservice. Everyone will eventually find out what God is to them in their own right. I will tell you this, it's not a man or a woman or this one being that is like a human that's up there dictating all of these things be done. The fact is that I can tell you that you are not just a spark of that, but you are that.
It's funny you said that, because yesterday I'm trying to get away from calling God and call him the creator, because and it goes deep because of the things that I see through the simulation is people who worship all kinds of things and call it could, and the God is, I think he loses a little bit more credit than that. I think that the creator of, or now did our creator, which was brought up on the podcast yesterday, did he hire Thoth, to actually be the actual architect of the universe? And did he because the Egyptians think that he did. So God actually, well, if you think about it, if you were going to have someone build a house for you, if you were going to have someone build a house for you, what would you you would hire somebody else? You wouldn't build it yourself. So did God, the creator, did he hire someone? Is the grand designer, is that thought?
Well,
the question is, I'm not a Krishna worshiper. That's not my thing.
There's so much.
My guy's Christ, but
there
I'm
is
saying
so much here, and there's a lot to unpack. Most of it is how open people are to allow the reverberation of the inverted matrix. And in religion, whether people like to hear that, I'm not here to tell people what they like to hear. I'm here only to say that there are very few things that are truths, what someone might call universal truths outside of our experience, okay? Because what we experience is generally real. Those are our truths. However, outside of this inverted matrix, that this is the inversion, one of the biggest parts of holding the inversion together is religion. And I struggled with this for years. And it's tough because the programming is just so incredibly strong, and it is based in fear. I will tell you, anything that is based in fear, absolutely anything, it doesn't matter what it is, anything, that it's polarity. You said it, pluses and minuses, that all holds us together. And is it really what's holding us together? Is God holding us together, right? Or are we holding ourselves together? It's source essence, which is God. Okay, that's what you would call God. It is source. Source essence holds everything together, right? But you are source. I am source. Jackson is source. We're all source. All of us are source. Doesn't matter if you are a signature embodied soul like you or I might be, or if you are a body right now that has had a soul that has walked out or has had some bounce walk-ins, and now they're playing the role of the NPC, the non-player character, or the extra, which is, that's another.
And that leads me to.
But I'm gonna keep going here.
Okay.
It doesn't matter what that soul is. We're all here still experiencing the reverberation, right? If there's no more power, if there's no more input, no more updates to the old inverted, the not original, the inverted matrix, the one that was installed. If there are no more updates to that, then that means that it will eventually fall apart. And it is falling apart because there are people like me and many, there are thousands and thousands, and it's becoming more and more every day. If you want to look at it like that, people are waking up and going inside and doing the inner work and uncovering what is true, not what has been programmed into them. And when you realize, or you have an awakening of some sort, and you continue to anchor your light, your source light here on what we would call the physical planetary grid of Gaia, in the original form, there's nothing holding it back now. So the light is spreading, and people are there. You want to look at it, widening, expanding the truth of who and what we are, and what we are as a human being, and then beyond that as a soul. And you could go even further as to a source, but all of us are on one level or another awakening to some degree. Now, this religion that we have is just a programming. And at some point, we will all be at a place where there is no more shaming anyone, because shaming is just, that's polarity at its finest. That is the glue that holds the matrix to because even though there's no more updates coming to the proverbial matrix, as I call it, there's no more updates to the inverted. But it is still there because we're still broadcasting it. And we're broadcasting it because we've lived here for the last, almost 43 years. And, some people maybe up to 100 years, regardless, up until the end of 2019, it was still there being powered consistently. But now there are all of us who are adults who are completely programmed in the ways of the inverted matrix. And there are not as many that are waking up yet to the fact that, holy shit, it's a game. It's an infinite game. There's so many levels of the game. And you do have to go through the awakening. I was just having this conversation with somebody, the awakening to what I call the unpleasant truths, the the 9/11s or the school shootings, or, understanding about all the conspiracy stuff. So understanding the false flags, why all of the wars have happened, why big pharma is what it is, why, the chemtrails and whatever. People can say those aren't real, but the fact is that I don't know which ones are real and which ones aren't, but it's very much a fact that we've been sprayed with chemicals to control a population. And there are groups of people who literally learned, and I mean, I could go into detail, we don't need to, but about, I've studied all of this stuff. I mean, where did the medical industrial complex come from? I mean, honestly, very, very early on, there were a group of people that learned that they could get spices and things from trading with India. They could give them to the population, make them sick, and then present them with a cure. Right? I mean, this is part of the control structure. Are there such things as human hybrids, aka it could be known as the Anunnaki? They could be known as reptilians. The fact is that that's perverse as well, because the true reptilian beings that are out there, most of them are not negative at all. But the Draco AI reptilians, which are part hybrided with this human elite that we have had, yes, these things they have all been real. They have actually all happened. They all helped keep humanity enslaved, if you will.
Right.
But we chose to do this before we came here. We knew. Now, we might not know sitting here right now that we chose to do it. However, we aren't victims of anything. The fact is that we are all source. We are all these incredible beings of light. And so as we wake up, the truth just starts to come out of like, who are we? Well, we're source. Where are we from? We're from source, right? I mean, we are part of all that is and ever will be. And we never die. It's like there is no end to the game, right? Now, I know what you were saying earlier about there being, maybe a paradise. I mean, the fact is that once you go through the uncomfortable awakening in this lifetime, because this will be the last lifetime that you will experience the inverted matrix, even if you are one that hasn't chose to fully wake up in this lifetime, you would then still evolve in an organic 3D. We are done with the inversion, but we've only known the inversion for this entire lifetime. Right. So therefore, there's going to be more in the next 3 years. There is going to be, like, we thought it looked weird when the quote unquote pandemic first started. And we thought that things looked divisive, and we thought that things looked weird with the quote unquote war that's going on, whether it's Ukraine, Russia, whatever the media wants to make all of that shit be. Right. Not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying that it's there. Whatever it is, it's all backwards.
But in my simulation, it's all just horseshit.
It is now, and so the horseshit is going to increase, and it's going to get.
You ship me off to the Ukraine, all of a sudden it might be in reality, and as long as they don't send any missiles over here, to me, I look at it as part of the simulation that I don't want to look at, because
you don't need to. You really,
because I don't know what's real about it and what isn't, because half the time the media is lying to you, and what's on the radio and what's on TV is just imaginary anyway. To me,
if you want proof of what I'm saying, that there is no more inverted matrix, dude, there are people you can say that you are. One's conservative and one is liberal. By the way, I've never been political at all, and I only aligned because I got really aligned to the Trump side of things for a while. Which I mean, I'm going to say if I had to vote now, I actually would. I wouldn't even vote, because there's, to me, if I'm voting, I'm actually powering the inverted matrix, right? And it is going to go away. And if you want proof, the proof is. I'm hearing this all the time from people that are on both sides of the aisle, if you want to look at it, going, dude, I don't listen to the news anymore, because the news is shit. The news is like, it makes me feel, I hear people talking and waking up all the time about they're literally talking about how people are lying to them everywhere, right? And it's like, talking the other day, somebody that I really respect was talking about, climate change. He was joking about people saying that climate change isn't real. And in a way, it is funny, because climate change has always been real. It's just been told to us that it's something different than it actually is.
Exactly.
We have had climate change for a long time. It's this current media that we're in that tries to make it something that it is not.
Exactly. Like the climate change thing, I have to say one thing about that on here, that because we do have a thing at the front of the show that always says the views of ours. But here's the views. The views is that climate change is fucking as real as it gets.
Well,
now,
yeah.
are we causing it? Now that's the question.
No, we
that's
aren't.
the
Look,
that's the big elephant in the room.
People are not grasping the fact that Gaia is a literally living being who can take care of herself and is taking care of herself. And we are going to have some earth changes that are going to really, this is part of what I'm going to say, that we're going to have a few years coming up ahead of us that are going to be really challenging. It is not all butterflies and roses. I mean, I can talk about how we are light and how we really are source and truly, I mean, we are heading into what the Bible would have talked about being the promised land, right? I mean, we are headed into we are in the golden age now, but we're watching the end cycle play out, and we still have some more time to go as people start really waking up. And if you want to talk about very chaotic, there are many people waking up from their religious programming, from what they had when they were children, not just religious, but all kinds of programming, corporate programming, whatever has told them that you have to be uncomfortable to then feel good. You have to have something bad to have something good. This is eventually going to go away, and there won't be. Living will just be so much more enjoyable because you won't have to be on a roller coaster. But what this all boils down to is the internal work, right? And we can talk about all the stuff out here. We can talk about the Earth was a prison planet, or we can go as far as to say the Earth is a prison planet and it's hard to be alive, all the way to, hey, we're source and everything is wonderful. But in between is doing the personal work, right? Is facing things. So one of the big ones for me recently, and I mean, I've been doing really deep personal work for the last year and a half. I was doing it before that, but in the last year and a half, like really getting into it. And so a perfect example is I am calling these experiences into my life. And as I'm calling these experiences in, it becomes very clear to me that I'm dealing with something that I have abandonment issues from when I was younger? Because that's a hot topic, by the way. People use that. Oh, do you have abandonment issues? And it's like, well, I don't know. What is it? So I had a facilitator from a group that I do my personal mastery work with called MTVO, Master of the Void organization. And my facilitator, Kyle, I hit her up and I said, hey, look, here's what I'm going through right now. Can you help me kind of line this out? Bear with me for a minute. Here's everything that's going on. And she comes back. She's like, absolutely. Here is like 8 different topics for you to think about. And, and she's tapping into my field, right? When she's doing this, and she's getting some information that's coming from my field that I'm a little bit muddied up on. And then she says, you look at these 8 things, and whichever one of these resonates the most with you, that's the one that you really, really lock in on. And of course, I went through, and at first, I thought it was one subject. I spent a couple of days on it, and then all of a sudden, it just became crystal clear. I can't tell you exactly how it happened. It just became really clear that what I was dealing with was rejection. And I've been dealing with rejection since, actually, I have another.
You would never guess in a million years, though, because you're a confident, very solid man. And that's funny because rejection doesn't seem like something you've always had a way with women.
But always. Well, here's what's interesting is I'm talking to my closest friends in the world, who's kind of my like ascension buddy partner. Her name is Kristen, and Kristen says, as I'm actually asking her for some advice to kind of walk me through. She is one of the very few facilitators out there that I know that like audibly hears my guides and her guides talk. Because I only will get pictures or we'll get some feelings, but they like she hears them audibly. And so if I'm not getting something, or if I really need some clarity, I'll ask her to give me a hand. And so she was kind of seeing some things as to what was going on. And I was describing to her how it was becoming very clear to me that some of this I think was even before this lifetime, but however, this has been happening to me this entire life, and I've been dealing with this rejection. So I go back and, okay, this goes back as far as some things that happened, when I was a child with my dad and things that are there. They're not really conscious. They are now because I brought them up, but I was able to surface them and then release them, right? Because I no longer need to hold on to them or identify with them. I'm able to bring it up. It comes out of my cellular memory, it comes out of my field. I can release that into the light of God, as we call it, release that back to source. And she said, she was asking me about how I would deal with things. And this all came up as a part of me getting back out and starting, being on dating apps and starting to date again and just having these experiences that honestly are just fucking painful, man. And I'm just like, this is just, really? It's just not fun. I mean, it's like, this is not how I remembered it ever being, but then it really started highlighting, and this is the perfect time. This is right as it's supposed to come up for me. And so she was asking me some questions, and I likened to her, like, so what I would do my entire life is when I would be rejected, I would immediately, and by the way, I think this is a very common human trait, I would immediately find the next best thing. Oh, this is how she said it. She said, so it's like when you were a kid, if someone came and were to take you had this chocolate, you really liked this chocolate, and they came and they took your chocolate from you. She said, you would just go and get more chocolate. And as long as you had more chocolate, it didn't matter to you. They took your chocolate. I said, actually, it's one much better than that. And when I say much, it's when they took my chocolate, I was like, I found other chocolate, and I ate that chocolate, and I was like, ooh, this chocolate's so much better than your chocolate. Fuck your chocolate. I didn't want that chocolate anyways.
I love that.
But that right there is the inverted matrix response. That is our human response.
Right,
that is what we've had our whole lives, because this is how we were taught to survive. You only have to survive in an inverted breed. That is it. That is such a polar reality that we have to survive. We have to survive. That isn't really a thing. We've experienced it. So it was, but it's no longer the reality we're in as long as we allow it to unwind.
It's so weird because of you saying that. I swear, but there's people though that, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's people who come along the way that the Creator puts in your life that makes you realize that without saying that.
You put that, and by the way, you put that in your life. They are part of source, but that's a contract. We have, our entire lives are contracted. This is very quantum. So you can be in different levels of understanding this, but contracts and agreements that we have, the soul contracts, as you would hear them called, they can change in life. And so I might say that your life was completely, you completely planned out your life before here, and you did, but it's on such a quantum level that you can't fully understand that you actually do still have free will when you are here. You actually really still are making choices, but you have already architected almost for up until the end of 2019, for every single thing that you did, there was another quantum reality already architected for that. So but you did, in this life, you were able to make whatever decision you wanted to make. Now that's, again, a whole nother topic, which our lives are not scripted in the way that they used to be. Things are different.
So you don't think that God and his buddies are up there when I was 16 years old and I got a hold of some hairy nipples? You don't think that they're all up there laughing at me?
Well, your guides were laughing, and your guides are just another. Okay, so your guides, yeah, they were absolutely loved. I mean, they were loving, and again, we give them human attributes, right? And they do in a way, because they are, most people on a spiritual path will talk about spirit guides, and in one way or the other, we do have guides. We have guides until we come to the realization that they're not outside of us. They're actually just us. They're just another aspect of us. And when we come into that 0 point and we actually are able to merge with that, which right now, you can hear me talk and think, he's got it all figured out or whatever, which is just not the case, because I've not yet merged with my guides. I mean, I still am in a level of the illusion where I've been expanding consciousness, but I'm still not to where I understand that it can be there, but I haven't done all of the work yet. Right. I mean, I'm in the process of doing more and more work. I mean, I've been learning about sacred sexuality, which, by the way, that has been the most hijacked of everything is sex. Because sex is actually nothing like what we've taught. It actually has nothing to do with being physical. That is actually the most perverse. I mean, as perverse as Jesus wanting to be worshipped is the idea of sex and and the physicality of it. I have no mastery over the subject. I'm just really learning about it right now. So I'm not even qualified to really talk about it, but it is the hardest part for me so far, because I'm having to, just this morning, I actually had to get up and I faced something where I decided that I was ready to walk through another. This is almost like a portal in a way, because I've been able to glimpse parts of myself on the other side of it, but I'm so different on the other side that it's the biggest. And you've seen me go through some transformations, but this is the biggest transformation yet. I can only liken it to the vision I had is I'm in a cocoon. This is actually the dream. This is actually the dream. What we're in right now is actually the dream state, right? That my reality state is I'm in a cocoon right now, but I'm going to come out the other side of it. I'm not a butterfly, I'm an eagle. And so the eagle really soars. This is where I really become who I meant to be, what all of my work is for. This is the real awakening. And there's so many people going through this right now, but it's fucking scary because I don't know that. I've really have learned how to trust my intuition because I've gone through some very loud, painful experiences where I grew up with severe obsessive compulsive disorder, and it took me it took me a long time to quiet that voice or to not listen to that voice. But then I got to a point where I needed to start discerning between what that voice was and what was actually my intuition. What is my source connection, right? Right. And that's something that these are all experiences that I signed myself up for before I came here. And I've evolved incredibly in doing so. And so here I am now, though, at this next step, and it's just as scary as the last one, if not more, because I'm going, holy shit, I'm going to walk through this. And as I do, it's like, you talk about the red pill or the blue pill, right? And it's like, I realize that it's like, okay, I'm not taking both this time. I'm taking the red pill. I'm literally letting a part of my personality structure slip away, which is scary because that is part of the inverted, in which I only know that porn, sex, being able to be very proud. You were talking about being very confident. Well, I've learned to, like all the other good old boys here in the US of A, or the whole fucking world, I guess, really, because we're all driven by everything is sex, money, and power, right? And you have to last the longest. You have to be the biggest, and you have to last the longest. And it's like, these are all things that are literally ingrained. This is the programming. This is a perfect example of the programming, the deepest part of it, which says, if you're the fucking best,
second.
You know what I mean? And if you can if you can be the best porn star that there is, you're a fucking real man. Dude, that's when you've spent so much time really perfecting that.
Focusing on that.
Fucking focus for real. And it's like that becomes a part of you. And then I become proud of the fact that these are the things that I can do, right? And so this defines me. Having to let all of that go, even though I know that that's coming. And the more that I expand my consciousness, the more that I become aware, and I become aware, and I become more aware that this isn't real. I'm literally part of holding in the inverse, but I know how hard it is as well, because I'm going through it right now, letting that part of me go. And I made a decision this morning that I was just going to step through it. And I need some help from, my facilitator and MTVO and my friend Kristen as a facilitator. Well, they will both help me walk through these. These are people that I've lined up also to be in my life to help me.
But would you call that loving people in the right way, or loving a woman in the right way?
It's very interesting, because really that's another hijacked subject, which goes very, very deep, right. Is that the idea of love is so earthly love is just conditional. There is no way about it, the other way about it, right? So when we talk about Christ and who Christ really was, he literally anchored the code of love, because essentially, to give you an overview, that inverted, about 2,000 years ago, that inverted matrix had taken over. It was so much, the planet got so dark that we have always had, if you want to call this source, the loving God, if you will, right. That has always been the directive. However, we are allowed to experience ourselves and play ourselves out, but it got so far that it was almost what we would consider to be lost. When Christ came, he came to anchor the code of love back into the conscious grid of the planet. Without Christ coming here, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
Exactly.
And so Christ brought that Christ brought that back, and he truly embodied, and people couldn't even understand, especially at the time. Most people couldn't even understand now what this true love is. That even if we try to tap into it right now, you can really only get to it in a state of what I would consider to be like a transcendental meditation. Other people may disagree. That's okay. But I feel like the true, like everything's conditional for us here, and that's okay, because that's just how it is still. We live in a polar world still. Right. So we don't have a lot of experience. Matter of fact, we have no experience in this lifetime of loving anything unconditionally, because we are not taught that. Everything is a condition of everything. I mean, that's a very deep rabbit hole of its own, but everything's conditional.
It's funny because last night I was sitting there watching TV with Tiffany, and I was imagining, and I'm not kidding either, I was imagining us being just two lights, just sitting there together. And like, that's the most romantic thing. That's the most romantic thing I think I could ever think. And I just looked at her and just said, "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life."
Dude, I just love, that's like, that gives me the chills, because that actually is what's seeping in to everyone's consciousness right now, whether they're consciously aware of it or not. You've always been, and I always say this to you, you're a bit more dimensional. You're a bit more, you have that psychic ability. You've had that since you were a kid. Or just some people are born and, you know, a lot of it's wiped away, but they still have a little bit more of that. We all have it. We're just, most of us don't know how to use it, right? Or how to be in contact with that part of us. But you've always had that there. So the part, I will say this, you will be one of the first ones, or you are one of the first ones who is starting to operate part of your life outside of the inverse. And it's literally, no one told you anything about that. You just all of a sudden thought an actual thought. That's like a real thought. That's not a controlled thought. That is, we're just two lights, which is actually true. You're just two lights.
Because because, you know, I mean, I've had some problems lately. I'm doing better though. I'm doing a lot better. But in those thoughts of someone telling me that I may have heart failure, which was complete bullshit, I'm thinking to myself, you know, I'm going to miss her so big. I'm going to miss her so bad that I'm not going to be complete when I leave, you know, or come back somewhere else.
So I'm going to have to, I got to say this. So this is the unconditional love. And this is something I've really been, and I've been working on, I would say, is understanding or coming into alignment with a detached, truly detached. This is true unconditional love. The detached love, and there's a lot of Eastern religions that would talk about, you know, the detachment, which is actually really important, because this is how you experience it outside of space and time. If you want to call it, this is how you experience it from heaven. This is how you experience it on the other side of the veil. It's all exactly the same thing. It is outside of this physical incarnation. How do we experience it? We look on it, and I've only had a few. This is why I say like a transcendental, and actually you're in a different space, right? But you can experience it and bring it back into the human body, that you have nothing but this overwhelming, you just want to call it joy. It's not overwhelming. You have this very peace and calm and joy, because you know you're watching it. You've already left, but you're watching it, and you realize that there is no such thing as leaving. It is just an illusion, and it is playing out, and it is fucking perfect. It doesn't get any more perfect. Everything is perfect. And I have one girl in particular who calls me everything is perfect, Erik. And I'm like, it really, even when it's not. And I'm an example, because even when I go through shit now, I just know that it's perfect, even though it doesn't feel like it's perfect. And I'm like, if I experience the death of a loved one right now, if my mom were to die tomorrow, I can promise you this much: I will grieve, because I'm a fucking human being. Will also promise you that I know that it's perfect, and that I will not tell you that it happened at a wrong time. Right. I mean, I can say this, and I mean, people are not going to like this, but if my daughter died tomorrow, which is, you know, that's
your heart,
you know, that's
tough.
Nothing would make that easy.
Nothing.
But it's perfect. Because when I say I right now, I am referring to the human entity.
Right.
I'm not talking about the I am, the I ascended master quality, because the I ascended master quality, the I am quality, sees things from outside of space and time. And outside of space and time is just everything is wonderful. And it isn't about, because then it isn't so singular, because you have lived thousands is probably not even the word, but just on this planet, you've lived thousands of lifetimes playing different roles with each one of those people. You have played every life. You have played every possible life as good and bad. Up until 1987, until the harmonic convergence, we had a thing called karma. And karma, which is a highly misunderstood term, was...
I totally agree.
Was something that actually it was a balancing. Karma, it was a law of balance. And so in one lifetime, you would play we played polarized roles, because this is a polarized planet. It was in an inverted matrix, but in order to balance out, there had to be an overall arch of balance, keeping this thing running from the, if you want to call it, the outside of that inverted matrix. We were all reincarnating here over and over again. In one lifetime, we would be a good. When you could be, we hear of the sinner and the saint. So in one lifetime, you're the one who was part of the cabal. Mm-hmm. And in the next lifetime, maybe it didn't have to be one lifetime to the next, but they had to overall balance out, right? So if you did that one lifetime, though, as that, you played it, and you agreed, by the way, to take on that life. You knew it wasn't going to be easy, but you agreed to take on that lifetime for a myriad of reasons. We might just look at it as one main reason why you took on that lifetime, because someone that you are part of a soul family with asked you to play that role. And so you agreed to play that role. I'm trying to keep it as simple as we can understand here. You agreed to play that role because they asked you to play it. And you said, okay, I'm going to do that for you. Then in another lifetime, because you had to balance it out, you then played the role of somebody that was really good and mostly positive. And it's so funny. And I've gone through this myself, where I go through the awakening, and the awakening is like, these people are bad, and the child sex trafficking. And yes, all this is happening, but it can't. You aren't a victim. No one's ever a victim. Those that are part of that game, the children who are taken in our people, some people listening to this are not going to like it, but this is true. The truth outside of space and time is that that soul has agreed to take on what it took on. And I'm not saying that it's easy for you to experience that as a human, because it is not. Right. Just like I said a minute ago, if my daughter was to I mean, I don't even like to think about it, but the fact is that I feel very grateful, is the feeling. I would say super fucking grateful that I have finally, or that I am now at this level of awakening, this level of expansion, where at least I wouldn't go deeper. Because, man, there are people that just completely lose it, and they do. They actually, you can have it all laid out for you, but we all have exit points, and we have multiple exit points. The idea of suicide being bad, I mean, it can be, but dude, we all have exit points, and we can get lost in drugs or anything.
With our children, especially, sometimes I look at my little ones and I just say, man, I wish I could be there for all those bad things that's going to happen, because there's no stopping it. There are going to be bad things that happen to them. Hopefully nothing fatal.
Are they bad?
But I mean,
this is the thing for you to ask yourself.
It's just, I wish that I could, that they could,
yes,
that I could have taken their pain and them just being,
and that is a very human. So that's a very human trait.
And that goes to where Christ, what he was trying to say. He was trying to say, hey, I'm trying to take the pain. I mean, or I'm trying to show you guys a sacrifice, because the sacrifice, you got to sacrifice things to make things happen in your life. Like the whole working out thing for me.
Right.
I'm just saying, for me.
Well, these are all parts of a growing. I mean, again, we are all, Christ's main message was trying to show everybody that they were source and they could do everything that he was doing, but that he literally, like, yes, he was special because he did come here fully and complete. I mean, you want to talk, there's a whole story around Christ actually being able to even come here, get into a human body and be born. I mean, like his vibration was so high that it really was not, it was almost not even compatible with this planet at that time.
Right, I agree.
But he also didn't have as difficult a life as people said. I mean, he was born into a very wealthy family, and he was set up to be able to do what he did. But what he ran up against, he truly was able to transcend, though, being on the cross, right? For example,
Right.
he was able to. He felt the pain, yes, but he also was able to be in a space of true alignment and divinity where he didn't always feel that pain, right? And he was crucified. There's no doubt about that. The idea of him dying for our sins, that is just a complete and total fabrication of that, because there is no such. By the way, drives me nuts. And I got to say it, I still have a little charge around this one, which I'm working on. But the idea that there is something called original sin, that you can be born a sinner, is fucking bullshit. You can't be a piece of shit. I don't care what you've done. You can't be a piece of shit. People can disagree with that, whatever you want. You're literally a divine being, no matter which side you're playing on. No matter what side you're playing on, how bad someone might see you being. And I could look at Hillary Clinton and say, that bitch is evil. I honestly don't think that anymore. I mean, in this lifetime, she's chosen to play a role that, dude, most of us, I wouldn't want to play that role.
Right.
Holy shit. I mean, those are really tough roles to play. And that is a role. She is playing a role that has helped so many people awaken, has also done what we would call really bad shit. But at the same time, it's like, we're all source. Every single one of us.
Hey, you better watch it. You might wind up having a bad day tomorrow.
You know what? You know what? And if I do, it's because I chose it.
Right.
It is because I chose it. And then again,
well, it won't be tomorrow because this isn't going to be released on Friday, but next Saturday,
well, no, it would
you may get a visit from the Clinton family.
You know what? It is just so interesting how all of this has played out. I mean, look, most of those who have played those roles in this lifetime, I do believe there's a truth to a lot of the whole, like the Gitmo stuff, the shit that was coming out, from Q, that, certain people are like, oh, it's conspiracy theory. No, there's truth to a lot of that. And I think there's been some really wild stuff that's happened. I think there's been a lot of arrests that have happened. I think that there have been people that have executed. I think there are clones. I think there are, the reality is so much wilder than we could ever imagine. I mean, it's so much.
So I don't want to get off base here, but I have to ask you before you're done, because I know you got to get out of here pretty quick. Did you see the videos of the reptilians that work for the government, our government? Did you see the shape-shifting videos?
I mean, I've seen this goes, but I've seen a bunch of these different things. At the end of the day,
there was one that looked pretty authentic, and I have to say, man, it really, look here, man. Joe's not doing a very good job of covering up things. Okay, he's saying things that's ridiculous, but we all expected that. About there being extraterrestrials here among us, where Robert Bigelow's on 60 Minutes and goes, Bob Bigelow goes, hey, they're not only here, they're among us, and this is real. I don't give a damn what anybody says. This is one of the most richest men in the world, and probably the guy who knows more about what's going on in that department than anybody. How do you feel? Do you feel that that's all true stuff? Or do you think it's all real?
Yeah, I mean, it is, and it depends how far it'll be as true. It is true. There's no doubt about it that part of this entire the matrix, the false matrix that I talk about. I mean, yes, part of this power comes from what people would call the Draco. The Draco would be what you would call about your human hybrids, right? And yes, there is a hybrid. They are a artificial intelligence. They are not actual. There is some other stuff we could get into, which is a whole nother deal. I know a lot about it. This isn't a subject you really master anyways. It's not a personal mastery. It's very much an outward thing, something that happens in.
I know we're talking about something.
But that being said, yes, that is a thing. However, there's many people that don't ever need to be aware that there was a ruling class of elites that by the way, they're not necessarily shape-shifting. They are, to our physical eyes, as a third density being, they are human. If you have dimensional sight and you can see if you are let's just say someone, the sixth sense, I see dead people, right?
Right.
If you have that sixth sense, you can watch them because you are actually seeing in between two worlds. There is literally in between. They are fourth dimensional beings and they are third dimensional beings. They are lower fourth dimensional beings who in that state you will see as reptilian.
And do you think some of those lie within the cabal?
All of them lied within the cabal.
Okay.
All of them.
That's what I was
Right.
wondering.
Yes. They were the leaders of the cabal. They were the actual royalty. They were the Draco royalty.
The founders are
yes,
the first.
absolutely. And they don't die. They're artificial intelligence. So you might see a body die, but that artificial intelligence that was hosting that body, it moves to another body. So it's just another. So it is a bloodline. This is actually why they needed the blood to stay pure within these fames. Why they inbred. They had to, because it was the only way that they could get that Draco AI fourth density being to then line up with another.
So
the blood.
interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's really like this stuff gets very complex. I mean, it's like you start talking about like different types of science and biology and all that.
Sometimes when we're talking alone, you lose me. Today, you get me on track pretty good. I mean, and that's not saying anything bad. It's just sometimes I'm like, I don't know if I understand what he's saying about that or not. And then I think about it. And then I think about, and I mean, you do have a lot of the same beliefs, and I do believe I have a lot to learn as being here, being a half alien, half human, hybrid guy. Because man, I just know that my people would make the decisions that these people make.
Yeah, and there's so many people that actually have this. So most of us, not all of us, are kind of not necessarily from here. We are from other places, but some have a higher resonance for other lifetimes in other places, and just have a resonance of, because there are so many different races. I mean, so many different races of beings. But we all chose to be here now. But some, like you, have this that you just know, you have a knowing inside of you that it's like, man, we wouldn't make these decisions, and you wouldn't.
Okay, here's a good example. Twerking. When I saw that, I went, "Are you serious?"
Yeah, I mean, like, dude. I mean,
no, but I just kind of went.
It's the perverse of the perverse of the perverse of the perverse. I mean, it's like,
come on, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's like
like twerking. It's like I'm not going. Are they serious?
Yeah, look,
they're serious.
And this is the stuff where people are like, man, just everything's going downhill fast. And look, it looks like it's going downhill fast. If you are on an awakening journey, you're actually kind of in between. You're like, well, part of me says it's this actually is good that it's gone this far, because it's actually going to go back, if we want to call it another direction, right? I mean, it's like, I will say this, it is going in what we would consider to be a positive direction. There's still going to be, I mean, we are going through a pole shift as we speak right now. I mean, it has been happening and it is continuing to happen, and it will finish happening in roughly 2025.
Overall, though, when about 7 years ago, it was before the boys were born, I took a trip to Arizona to do a record, and I also, the second trip, I did 2 trips out there, and I did it in a farm truck. I knew that I was going to break down, and because I wanted to break down, because I wanted to talk to people, because I'd been locked in a control room my whole life, always with some woman that was way over jealous, so I couldn't go anywhere or do anything, or they were going to do, just some crazy shit all the time. And I'm free. So I'm going to go out there. Of course, I was with Tiffany at the time, and I called her because I've told you about some strange experiences I will not tell on here, but I had some really weird experiences on that trip, like beyond weird. But the one thing I learned is there's good people out there. I mean, roadside assistance was calling me to see if I was doing okay, because I broke down so many times. With a flat tire one time with a water pump, next time it was this, next time, and they're calling me to see if I'm doing okay. There's some good people out there. I'll never forget going over to Mexico, and on the way back, stopping on the side of the road and lighting up the grill. And this truck driver, and it's right there at El Paso when you go down, and there was nobody at the border. Of course, I already went to Mexico. They already told me, get the hell back over there. You're going to get killed over here. Mm-hmm. You're going to end up being American stew, basically. Mm-hmm. And then I pulled over on the side of the road, and I get out the grill, and I had some steaks in the cooler. And I thought, well, man, these steaks aren't going, I don't want to have to worry about icing these down all the way to I get to Phoenix. So I was like, well, heck, so I get out there and I'm flagging these guys down. This first truck, I'm flagging him down on the side of the road, and he pulls over. I guess he thought my truck was on fire. And I run up there and I go, hey, man, you want a steak? He goes, what? I'm like, you want a steak?
I love it.
And he goes, a steak? I said, yeah, I got some big, thick, juicy steaks. Listen, I'm just a guy traveling, man. You want to have a steak with me? And he stopped his truck, backed up. He calls his buddies. I got 3 trucks on the side of the road.
Oh, shit.
I got my acoustic guitar out.
Hey, you never told me the story. I love that.
Showing them song ideas. and man, you talking about, and I heard all about them living. 2 of them was raised in Mexico. One of them was raised right there in El Paso. And we sit there and shut when they're like, man, what an amazing morning.
Dude, this is what I would call a great experience, a great example of an experience that you would have in the original, in not the inverted, but the actual, the organic, the 3D, 4D, 5D, whatever you want to call this, this is, it's not controlled. It's not polar. It's not anything. It isn't. You weren't so excited you could barely stand it, and you weren't so low. You were just right in the middle, and you just were joyful. You were just joyful, and you were in the fucking moment.
I want to hear their stories about their lives so I could write songs.
Dude.
And one of them gave me a great idea for a song, and I wrote a great idea and wrote a great song from it. A couple of them did. Well, actually, one of them was actually that's right. One of them was from an actual reservation, and I had never met an Indian from an actually grew up on a reservation. So it was so interesting to me to hear these people's lives and how they grew up and where they're from, and they have mom and dads like we have, man. They love their sisters and brothers just like we do.
Even the people that we don't like, that we are in opposition to in life. One thing that I'll say is we're going to wrap this up here in a second, but everybody, for the most part, I mean, if you are not a hybrid artificial intelligence, right, even the ones that we see as bad, they're doing the best that they can with what they've got on any given day. And I'd say for most people, you can disagree if you want, but I think most people, and this goes for pretty much anybody, they're just doing the best that they can with what they've got. And that's it, right? I mean, they're just human beings doing what you do as a human. And we've all done things that we're not proud of. We've all done things we're proud of. And it's kind of like everywhere in between, right? And it's like, man, that's what the human experience is really about. It's just about being in the moment and enjoying each other's company. And we've gotten very, very far from that. But meditating on that specific experience will bring you into what I call the neutral state. It'll bring you into a very, it's a 0-pointed field where there isn't any, it's not good. It's not awesome. It's not, it's not positive. It's not negative. It just is. And it's just like you have this experience, which is joyful. You enjoyed it. And that really is what we're supposed to do here.
Right. Right.
We are just supposed to enjoy. We've got a long way to go before we get there. But I will say that, dude, we're well on our way to being there, because there are a lot of front runners out there, and there's a lot of people right behind them. There's a lot of people right behind them. And for the most part, we're just now really starting to talk about this stuff. I mean, 2 years ago, I wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't have this conversation with you.
I think that's the highest part of our technology.
It is
right here.
It is
like us talking about this kind of thing on this podcast. I think is the biggest part of our technology. Instead of a cell phone, instead of a freaking streaming and all this bullshit, it's been able to talk about the fourth dimension, and people don't quite understand that, and I don't quite understand it to some degree.
Yeah, you don't need to. Just the idea that there is an expanded consciousness, that there is something more than what you currently understand. Right. If you are open, and I will say this, and then I'm going to shut up, but I will say, if you're just open a little bit, that there's more than what you currently understand, and you're actually open to looking at yourself and becoming aware that you've got some work to do internally, right?
Oh, yeah.
That just becoming aware of it, just aware. I'm not even saying you got to start doing the work right now, but just aware that it's there. You are part of the change that is happening to the planet. And no matter what, everything is perfectly aligned, and you can choose to speed it up if you want. But you can go right at the pace that you are and just do things in more of a comfortable manner, and they will just unfold. You just have to be open to them unfolding.
And just try to be 1% better than you were yesterday. I mean, that's how I'm that I have to go about it, because I knew that I wasn't ready to get married until I asked Tiffany to marry me. I knew that I wasn't ready to take on the things that I'm taking
Be
on.
authentic. That is also it. Some people have a hard time understanding authentic because we've been programmed that authentic is something that it's not. Authentic is just really, truly, trying as much as you can understand who you are, just being true to that. Don't do something because somebody else wants you to do it. If you're going to get up in the morning and go to the gym, don't get up in the morning and go to the gym. If you don't like to, don't get up in the morning and go to the gym because someone else told you to do it. Get up in the morning and go to the gym because you had an experience that showed you that if you got up and you went to the gym, that you actually started getting into this routine, and it made you, whether it's 1%, 2%, or it just made you better than it did the day before. Right. That is where you and I are saying exactly the same thing. Yeah, you may have to
make two voices. This voice that says no.
Yeah.
Get some cookies and milk and go back to bed.
Yep.
Here's the other one. It goes, get your ass up and go make yourself a better man.
More and more. When you listen to we'll call it the devil on the shoulder. If you listen to that one's going to give you you're going to feel increasingly bad about yourself, because this is where the energy is going. You will feel, it's like, if you think you felt bad before, you're going to feel even worse until you get to a point where you actually start listening over here. And once you do, you'll go, man, I don't know why I ever listened to the other one. It happens every time.
Erik Baker, you are the man.
So with that,
man, Erik Baker, thank you so much for coming. And you know what? There's going to be an Erik Baker part 2. We have to have an Erik Baker part 2. But man, what a great podcast! It's how interesting, and man, everybody's fired up about hearing this one. I'm serious. Like all of our friends are like, Holly Hutchinson's like, hell yeah. Fuck yeah. It's great to have you, in my life as a friend.
Man, I couldn't agree more. I love you, brother, and thanks for having me on. And I'll be glad.
Thank you guys for tuning in, man, and thank you guys for listening. Because on this one, I'm gonna try to have some little aliens like popping up on our shoulders while we're talking.
That would be awesome. Yeah.
So, and if they count so many aliens, then the aliens, I'll give them a free T-shirt or something.
I love it. I love it. Well, thanks for having me, man.
Awesome.